through this NISM platform. It's a privileged opportunity, and thanks for organizing this webinar. Let me do a quick round of introductions. Tanisha has already given the introduction, and it is great to hear from her. So my name is Shirsendu Chaudhuri. I currently work as the Chief Revenue Officer for SecureTech, and I'm based out of Mumbai SecureTech office. Um, I have a long 20 years career in enterprise risk, enterprise application space, all across software and digitization platforms. Today, I would like to take this platform to help you understand how cybersecurity risk, especially in a very crucial market like the capital market, and where we can play our role through our awareness, resilience, and response. Uh, Today's discussion is not about any cybersecurity tools or products. It's about risk, specifically how identity has quietly become one of the most crucial or critical source of risk in capital markets and BFSI institutions. When you talk about cybersecurity incidents, we often focus on cyber attacks, hackers, malware. You may have heard those terminologies quite often. But in reality, many of the most serious issues, which arises from something far more basic in nature. It's about the access. We have an access to multiple platforms, solutions, technologies, and devices, etc. So we do get an access. So it boils down to who has an access, why they have the access, and whether that comes no, the access they have is justified or it's relevant. So we will talk today about cybersecurity from a identity perspective. It can be individual identity, it can be machine identity, it can be an application identity. We will discuss about identity as a topic in today's webinar. And you can always ask me questions after the event. I will be more than happy to answer all your queries. But before we go and discuss why identity is very critical for BFSI risk, I wanted to start with a small case study. Um, it's about a case where it involved a mid to large Indian capital market institution, part of the trading and brokerage ecosystem. We are speaking about an institution which is part of a trading and brokerage institution. What happened there? Let's understand. There was no external cyber attack. There was no system outage. There was no compromise on perimeter security. It looked very normal. Yet there was an issue directly impacting the trading controls. A routine internal review identified that a user ID belonging to a former dealer who had moved out of the trading desk several months earlier still had active access for a critical trading support system. Let me rephrase the sentence again. A routine internal review, during the routine internal review system, it was identified that there was a user ID of a former dealer who had moved out of the trading desk several months earlier still had active access to a critical trading support system. Means that person has moved away from his current role, but he still had an access to the trading support system. Now, what happened because of that one? The system did not execute trades directly, but it had the ability to do view live order books, modify pre-trade risk parameters, override certain operational checks during market hours. The individual had changed roles within the organization, moving from a non-trading function. He moved to a different function from a trading to a non-trading function, but still he had the access. The HR system within the organization reflected the role very correctly. However, what happened? The access rights were not updated. Means he had moved from his current position to a new role, but the access rights that were given to him for the earlier role still persisted, not updated across all downstream trading and risk platform. The access existed because the original access was granted manually. Means somebody created an access for him. His identity was created within the system. There was no after that there was no periodic access certification, and there was no segregation of duties policy enforced across the system. So it means though the identity was given to him, the user access was provided to him, he had a user ID and password. As he moved from his current role to a new role, his access remained. And the access remained because everything was done manually. There was no periodic access review. What we say user access review was not done periodically, and segregation of duty policy enforcement was not done. Now, this became a very critical issue. The access was, however, was never used, nor there was any manipulation or any foul play that happened from that user ID, and no financial loss. But what happened during the compliance review, the organization clearly could not demonstrate why this access still existed, who approved it after the role has changed, and whether the access has been reviewed or not. From a regulatory perspective, now let's bring to the, we are bringing into the picture in this case that I am describing you here, a regulator who is doing this audit. For them, those explanations that why this access still existed after the employee moved to a different department, who approved it after the role has changed, whether the access has been reviewed or not, there was no proper explanation. The observation was not about an incident, it was about a control failure. The organization failed to provide the control during the entire process. The regulator's concern was very, very simple. If the trade could have happened, why was the access allowed? Then, after that, what happened? Immediate suspension of similar access across the desk. Obviously, regulator felt that there was a misstep, there was no proper process in place. They immediately suspended similar access across the desk. One inactive user not deactivated, brought the entire business to a very critical stage. A comprehensive access cleanup exercise. They had to do a complete access review, understand who need to have the access. So access cleanup exercise was done, and enhanced regulatory reporting, they increased the scrutiny on identify and access governance across the trading systems. Once again, let me reiterate, there was no hacking, but what happened is that the trust in the control effectiveness was weakened. The entire trust has been compromised. But this case highlights a critical reality in capital market or in any financial institution for such. Access to trading system is itself a market risk. Whoever has the access has to be managed, has to be moved properly. If the person has moved out of the organization of the role, the entire process has to be done. And unless identity is governed continuously, it's not a one-day process, it's not a manual process. Obviously, it can be manual to some extent, but unless it is governed continuously, not just provisioned at onboarding, such risk remains invisible until an audit or regulator asks the question. This is why financial market, especially the capital market, securities market, identify governance is not an IT control, it's a market integrity control. And that brings us to the core principles of today's discussion. If identity is not governed, risk cannot be governed. I hope that case study that I gave made some sense. So now let's look into the slides that I am presenting here. So I made a statement. If identity is not governed, risk cannot be governed. And hence, identity is a very crucial aspect in the BFSI risk parameter. Right? If identity is compromised, it can it can it can lead to multiple breaches, misuse of the identity, and breaking the parameter, what is the security parameter out there. So identity is a very, very crucial subject in cybersecurity today, and that's why we will look into this topic as we go ahead. Now let's look into the another subject in terms of identify risk landscape in BFSI. Right? What are the things that we are looking out here? What we need to understand as identity risk, right? So, if you look into the slides out here, there are six boxes out there: access, and role creep, offend and dormant account, like we discussed in our case study, a couple of minutes back. Privilege access misuse, vendor and third-party exposure. That's one of the very, very critical items in identity parameter, right? Manual JML failures. What is JML? Joiner, mover, lever. Means an entity or a person joins the organization, moves within the organization. We discussed in our case study. He moved from a financial a role to a non-financial role. We move across the organization. So as we move, our identity within the organization changes. And when we leave the organization, our identity need to be revoked. So JML is a very important process, and manual JML failures. Most of the organizations today depend on manual process of joiner, mover, and lever process, and hence it becomes very difficult. And then obviously the regulatory and the audit drift. Right? We discussed in terms of how that identity that was created for an employee who moved out of the current role became a very sticking point with the regulator, that came to audit. We need to also understand one more very important factor. Over the last decade, last decade, the BFSI organization have transformed rapidly. Core systems coexist with cloud platforms, SaaS applications, fintech integration, and outsourced operations. Today, you are not walking in a silo. You are walking in an ecosystem. In case of a banking, there may be a core banking sector, core banking application. In case of other financial institutions, there are some core applications out there. Then there are multiple software as a service platforms that provides you point-to-point application or point-to-point business use cases. Then there are integrations with other fintech, data providers, access to different applications, etc. And you have outsourced operations. With that transformation comes explosion of identities. Employees, vendors, partners, service accounts, and privileged users. The reality today is most breaches and control failure do not occur because someone breaks in. They occur because somebody already inside had more access than they should have, or access that was never revoked. From a regulator perspective, identity no longer is an IT concern. It's a business risk, a compliance risk, and increasingly a board level accountability issue. And you see, if you look into the slide out here, there are multiple regulators across the globe. In India, for example, the certain compliance needs, IT Act, IRDA, RBI, SEBI, and National Critical Infrastructure, NCIIPC, Companies Act, Digital Personal DPDPA Act. There are a lot of acts out there across the globe. If you look at US, look at Europe, look at Middle East, look at East Asia, you can see there are multiple laws and processes that have been put in place to ensure that you comply by the cybersecurity guidelines and policies. And identity is one of the very important part within that ecosystem of compliances. And if you look into the Indian BFSI regulatory landscape, RBI's cybersecurity and IT risk framework, SEBI's cyber resilience and access control guidelines, insurance IRDA's information security requirement, ISO 27001 and SOC standards. So all these are expectations from the BFSI institution to have a proper IT cybersecurity in place. Now, what regulators expect in practice? Enforcement of least privilege, periodic user access review. These are very important. Organizations get audited. Organizations get mandated because of those expectations from the regulators. The third most important item is the segregation of duties controls and clear audit evidence and traceability of approvals. These are all important steps from an Indian BFSI regulatory landscape in terms of identity controls and governance that is concerned within the overall cybersecurity landscape. Now, what is the role of identity governance and administration? There are three basic pillars of identity governance. One is identity access management, what we call as IAM. Then there is privilege access management, PAM, and overall identity governance and administration, the third pillar. Now, if you look into the analogy of it, identity and access management is like the security guard, right? You have your security guard who will only give you access if you can identify yourself. The privilege access management can be, the analogy comes like when you access your bank vault. And identity governance and administration, the best analogy is your internal auditor, right? So these three basic structures of identity forms the overall framework for identity governance. The focus is authentication. In how you authenticate when you access any premises today, you need to either give a use code, password, biometrics, etc., etc. Once you come in within the system, you need to ensure that you do login. So authentication of your user identity. Sometimes we use terminologies like single sign-on, SSO, etc., to ensure that you have a proper access. You need to also have, for some privileged access management, you need to have privileged control access, high risk root admin accounts, etc. And overall, you need to have a governance and policy enforcement and compliance. So these are the three basic pillars in terms of how identity today is being managed within the purview of cybersecurity frameworks and policies. And then we discussed what are the core IG capabilities, JML, like we mentioned, when somebody joins the organization, moves within the organization, leaves the organization, the entire lifecycle automation around it, access request and approval workflows, periodic access certifications. Your manager need to certify your access. At every point of time, there has to be a record who is accessing the system, what is the user access right, and etc. All this becomes the core identity governance capabilities the organization looks for either to be implemented or to be, or through a process or through a tool. If you look into the key IG use cases in BFSI, these are the very important aspects out there. Indian regulatory ecosystem is robust and very well defined. Whether we look at RBI, we look at SEBI, we look at IRDAI, the certain guidelines, the digital DPDPA Act, etc. The use cases are very, very clearly being defined. So the definition comes into how the employee access is governed. Role-based access aligned to the job functions. If I am in a certain role, what are the access that I need to have to perform that job? What are the, then what is the faster onboarding? If I have to get an access, how quickly I can get an access and how quickly I can exit or a clean exit can happen, right? Then we also need to have a privileged identity governance. We need to have a governance layer over privileged access. We need to have a clear ownership and approval of elevated access. We need to have a third party and vendor access governance. Third party and vendor access is a big subject by itself. It's not limited to the organization, but it is across your ecosystem. Time bound and purpose based access, continuous review of outsourced identities, audit and compliance readiness, centralized access evidence, and obviously the reduced audit observations and faster closures. So this becomes a very wide framework how IGA use cases are implemented within the banking, financial, and overall, the financial sectors out in India. Now, if you look into this business and risk outcome, what are the risk and operational impact? Reduction in access-related audit findings, operational efficiency through automation, improved regulatory responsiveness, lower insider threat exposure. Now, those are terminologies that we need to understand out there. It is important to recognize that identity governance is not just about compliance. Well-implemented IGA programs consistently deliver measurable outcomes. It has to. What are the things? It has to reduce access-related audit findings, faster audit closures, lower insider threat exposure. It has to improve regulator confidence, reduced operational overhead. At a board level, identity governance becomes a risk reduction lever, not a cost center. It enables organization to grow with confidence, knowing that access is not controlled and accountable. Today identity access is regulated by the board. And I know we have been in the market. We know multiple organizations who have been, given strict guidelines by the regulators to implement the identity-related governance and administration framework. If they are not able to comply or adhere to the requirements, then they face multiple actions, penalties, etc. within the system. But however, all these are not only to ensure that you only manage from a regulator perspective. You also need to ensure that your organization is completely aware of the risk from an identity risk perspective. You as an user, you need to also understand what access you need to have, what privileges you need to have. So it is not only from a regulatory perspective, but also from a usage and a adoption and a strategy perspective or a hygiene perspective. Identity becomes one of the critical aspects. Otherwise, insider threat is the biggest threat today in cybersecurity. Identity is the foundation of the digital trust. If identity is compromised, it can lead to multiple issues, leading to huge cybersecurity, policy issues, as well as in terms of managing multiple other consequences, most related to it. So if we look into the cybersecurity state of affairs, and a very interesting fact we need to see out here, right? Cost of data breach, if you look into the right part of it, average cost of data breach for financial organizations that did not use security, AI, and automation is almost to the tune of 5.56 million. It takes average 181 days to detect an attack, right? If your identity is compromised, an attacker has came into the system, is trying to get something out from the system. It takes 181 days for you to detect, and then 60 days for you to ensure that you can contain that attack. So you see, it's a very much time consuming activity, and it takes a lot of pain to ensure that you get rid of this entire process. So if you look into it, the cost of managing this entire breach because of cybersecurity breaches, and ensuring that you are being attacked is a very high, is very high. It's not only about the financial loss; it's also about the reputational loss. We looked into the case study earlier. The reputational loss is because the trust within the organization has been breached. The ecosystem knows that there is a breach, and hence the trust within the organization cannot be taken. So ensuring that everything is in place is very important from an overall cybersecurity guidelines and perspective that needs to be in place. In BFSI, access is the power. We know all, we are very aware of it, right? Identity governance defines who has the power, for what purpose, and for how long. And hence, if you look into it, when identity is governed well, fear reduces, confidence improves, and growth becomes possible. Right? And it helps you to have business continuity. It ensures that you maintain a very high level of security posture, and manage your compliances. Impacts are mentioned down below. Your brand reputation, we spoke about it, the trust factor. You are okay, you are very well managed if you're managing it from a regulatory compliances perspective, and you ensure that your critical assets are well managed. So if in totality, when we look into it, if we look into it, it's about managing your overall cybersecurity posture, right? In identifying, protecting, detecting, responding, and planning to recover. So best practices of a resilient identity program. First, let's look into the don'ts, right? Let's not do a poor role definition. Let's not have a role which is not well defined. Let's not over customize it. Let's not treat identity or identity governance and administration as a one-time tool deployment instead of an ongoing program. What we need to do, we need to start with your high-risk systems and applications. We need to understand where is the most risk is. Establish an HR as an identity source of truth. The definition in your HR system has to be replicated within your administration of identity governance. And hence, establishment of HR as the identity source of truth is the very important part. And adoption of phased implementation approach, and ensuring the business ownership is not just an IT ownership, right? If you do this, and you'll be rest assured that you are following a resilient identity program. So if you look into it, what are the key takeaways out from this discussion today? The key takeaway is identity is the new security parameter. Governance matters more than authentication alone, and regulators expect evidence, not intent. Again, let's reiterate that statement. In BFSI, access is the power. Identity governance determine who has that power, for what purpose, and for how long. This is all about the topic today. I wanted to open the forum for discussions and see if there are questions out there.
So can we take our poll question and answer?
Sure.
Yes. So I'm launching first question. Yeah. Is it visible, sir, to you?
Yes.
So, sir, I am sharing the results now of the poll.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it visible to you?
Yeah.
So 37 of the participants have chosen role-based access, 24 of the participants have chosen policy-based, and 12% manual approvals, and 27% has chosen automated workflows.
Yes. So I think the answers are visible to all of you. So one of the very important aspect is how is user access control managed in your organization today, right? 37% have said that role-based access. Absolutely right. Uh, the roles, as we have seen in the couple of slides back, is the most important. The clear defined roles is the most important aspect for managing your access control within the organization. So role-based access is the correct answer out here. And if the roles are not defined properly, that leads to confusion. It leads to multiple access, poor access privileges, and that can lead to insider threats or issues related to cybersecurity. Next question, please. Yeah. So I think the poll has overwhelmingly 62% saying credential vaulting to store and rotate privileged and password securely. 31% had given session monitoring to record and analyze admin activities. 8% have said just in time for temporary elevations. You know, the correct answer, one of the very important answers out here is JIT, just in time access. In modern identity access management or privileged access management, JIT access is the preferred model because it eliminates always, you know, eliminates always on-standing privileges. Grants access only when required for a limited duration, and reduces blast radius, insider risk, and audit exposures. Now, this is a very important one to understand what is important. So, it can be a combination of GIT plus session-based controls as well. Right. In case of credential vaulting, it's important control, no doubt about it, but not an access model by itself. So the answer, the correct answer is JIT access for temporary elevations. But we, all this, all these terminologies also stand in terms of how this entire process is being managed. Next question, please. Wonderful. You know, this is a very important subject, and we have seen this in our case study and our presentation as well. Most of the organization, unfortunately, today does reviews either annually or quarterly or only during audits. Yeah, because they wanted to be compliant, they wanted to just have a tick mark in place. But the right answer, as 53% of the respondents here have said, it's continuous and risk based. Right? Why it has to be continuous and risk based? It have a high risk user roles entities are reviewed more frequently. Triggers like role change, privilege escalation, inactivity, or risk signals prompt reviews, and compliance is maintained throughout the year and just not for the review cycle. It's a very important aspect towards it. Thank you for identifying it. Next question, please, sir. Wonderful. So if you look into the result here, I think 43% overwhelmingly is the correct answer. Poor identity visibility and complex gap due to inconsistent policy enforcement. Zero trust, for all of your understanding, fails not because of tools or intent, but because organizations do not fully see their identities and entitlements. So poor identity visibility is a very important aspect towards this very important topic of zero trust, identity-based zero trust. So the second point is, as mentioned by 43% respondent, is the correct answer. Thank you.
Yes, so now I request attendees to ask their questions in a Q&A section so that sir can address it. So until that time, you can touch upon the key takeaways or session highlights which you
Absolutely.
want to highlight.
So as I have been repeating, reiterating, and telling it repeatedly out here, in financial institutions, financial market, capital market, trust is everything. Trust in systems, trust in processes, and ultimately trust in people. Financial markets, function not just because technology works, but because controls hold under pressure. Controls holds during volatility, during scale, during scrutiny. Identity governance is one of the very important control. It's not a very loud control, but it's a very important control, a quiet control, as we say. When it works, nothing dramatic happens. Trade executes normally. Audit passes smoothly. Regulators find clarity instead of confusion. But if it fails, if this small, important, not small, I should say, a silent uh, parameters, if it fails, even without an incident, even without a cybersecurity incident or a confidence erodes, the entire trust goes out. What regulators are increasingly looking at, did something go wrong? No, they are not asking that. But they are asking, could something have gone wrong or could have gone wrong? And would you have known that earlier? Right? So that's a very important aspect about it. Strong identity governance answers that question. It ensures that access is intentional, accountable, and time bound, that power is aligned with responsibility, and that market integrity is protected, not reactively by design. In financial and capital market, access is not a technical permission, it's a risk instrument. Access governance is a risk instrument. How well the organization governs it will increasingly define how resilient, credible, trusted the institutions are. It's a very important control, and every regulator today is looking it into a very, very wide spectrum and with very attentive details. So that's a very important aspect in cybersecurity control and governance. Thank you for the time today. If there are no questions, we can close the session today.
So there are few questions actually in Q&A section.
Sure, let me see.
Yes.
Samir Chakravarti has asked how to get rid from the fraudsters who give us advice in Telegram. Don't listen to them. You know they're already fraudsters. But it's important to distinguish, right? Most important thing is the common sense. We have a lot of knowledge that is available to us through our digital platform, either through webinars, podcasts, etc., etc. You know exactly how and where you can fail, right? Use your common sense, understand the spectrum, the landscape that you are currently in, and try to make yourself protected. Ensure that your passwords are not very easily understood or accessible. Your password cannot be your birth dates, your name, 123, etc., etc. Ensure that you maintain some sort of a hygiene around it. Ensure that you keep yourself updated, and that's how you will help give yourself the protection that you are looking for. The next question comes from Russell Rana. What strategy an investor can take to be safe in cybersecurity context? You can take multiple steps, like we have discussed out here. But the most important and the most relevant or most important aspect today is identity control. You can have very sophisticated systems, very nice processes, expensive tools that you can implement. But if your access is compromised, your identity is compromised, you will be at risk. And hence, one of the as apart from many other things, like we have mentioned in this webinar today, identity is very important context to ensure that you are cybersecurity resilient. Dr. Vijay Shankar saying very informative session. Thank you very much, Vijay. Palash, how can retail investor assess and mitigate risk with respect to cybersecurity? Ensure that your systems are very well managed. There is no identity theft. You have a right, you have basic antiviruses in place. Your ecosystem of user access and passwords are well managed and not leaked. There is certain sort of a sanity in terms of how you define your password, Polash. So all these things are very important to ensure that you can assess and mitigate your risk from a cybersecurity perspective. Satya, how does your IAM strategy align with zero trust and regulatory compliance requirement? IAM is the most important factor today in regulatory compliance requirement. If you go to any of the regulatory compliance, CBCA, CRF, RBI, IRDAI, implementation of identity and access management, user access review, zero trust regulatory policies, the framework is very well defined. Go through the framework, ensure that you understand it, implement it, adopt it, and practice it. And there are multiple tools available within the ecosystem to ensure that you can manage it. So hence, you just being relevant today is important, and understanding the cybersecurity compliances are the most important out here from an identity perspective as well, Satya. Ravindra is asking, as identity governance tells us who has the power or control, what are the tools organization uses to identify them? So you have multiple tools available in the system, that you can that you can implement for identity governance. There are you can reach out to me, Ravindra, after this meeting. We can discuss in terms of different tools and others. But the most important thing is that how you define your control, right? Who has the power, right? Who has the authority? Who has the access? How you define your roles and responsibilities, how the HR system has been defined, how the HR system's roles definition come to the actual production environment is very important. There can be tools that can help you out, but if you define it properly, your cybersecurity and identity governance are taken care of. Best website or SEBI of SEBI to read it. SEBI itself has given the cybersecurity resilience guidelines, SEBI CSRF guidelines out there. Please go through it. You will be able to understand how SEBI has well defined the cybersecurity policies for the institutions to adopt. I think those are the questions. There are no other questions out here.
Yes, I think you have answered all of the questions which was asked by attendees.
Sure. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you all. I wish you happy new year and looking forward to this kind of sessions going ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.